Hey guys, so it might be Christmas in July. If you know, you know. But NewJeans Mama certainly seems to be trying to bring Halloween a bit early with her tricks that certainly ain't treats by trying to scare Si-hyuk by sending the police over after she cookie-hearted a deal. Now, we're going to go over the timeline of what went on because this was a very end of July moment, and it totally looks like she's trying to divert attention from when she was completely humiliated by B-Lift in court, and then also NewJeans being completely humiliated in court, and which politician also benefits from this whole drama around HYBE to sort of downplay what's going on in the whole political world. So in Korea, just like the United States, if authorities are going to come into your property, search, seize, and open up all them cabinets and drawers and just throw things around, searching for evidence, they have to have the appropriate warrant. In the United States and in South Korea, judges approve the search warrants, but in South Korea, the prosecutor and not the police are the ones that request the warrant and go to the judge with the warrant. So the police, if they want to go and raid somebody's house, they got to go through the prosecutors first. And prosecutors had already turned down twice the police for this investigation or this search warrant into Si-hyuk and the HYBE headquarters. In the United States, police or federal agents, for example, the FBI, are the ones that request the warrant, but also a judge has to sign off on it. Well, the prosecutors, why did they approve it this time? Well, they were pressured by the FSC, the Financial Supervisory Commission. So if the Financial Supervisory Commission, which also has them bigwig politicians who cannot be embarrassed if they're saying like, we request a search warrant, then that puts added pressure on the prosecutors to then go to the judge, get the warrant, and then say, okay, police, go and try to find something. Now, this looks like to me a big fishing expedition, because when they're searching and they're just pulling all your hard drives and all this kind of stuff, I mean, we've seen the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing. You pull on one little USB stick, you know, a server comes out, but you find other dirt. And it looks like it's one of these situations where they're trying to do the most to try to get other dirt, because it doesn't look like there's really much to stand on with this whole IPO investigation. Now, IPO, initial public offering, Si-hyuk is being accused of financial fraud that benefit him in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and the way that they're making it seem as if he's defrauding ordinary investors. No. In the worst case scenario, if he were guilty and he totally was fraudulent, he'd be basically defrauding a few employees and some VIP investors. Now, the way that this thing doesn't make sense is that it's almost like coulda, woulda, shoulda. The people who are suffering, quote unquote, and we don't even know if they're actually the ones bringing this case, they got stock options at like $1 a share, and you actually have to put your own money to buy the stock options and then wait for the IPO. Now, if you know, in the United States, just because you buy a stock option in the company that you're working for, there is absolutely no guarantee that your company will IPO. Apparently, 90 to 95% of companies that do this whole startup thing and offer IPO shares to their employees and early investors, they never get their money back. They lose their money because it is a bit of a gamble. You are gambling. You are putting faith into your work and everybody else's work around you that you're going to get the shares early and eventually it'll IPO. So from the get-go, everybody knows that the end goal is, yes, an IPO. And so the way that the media is positing it is as if Si-hyuk was like secretly planning an IPO and not telling anybody about it. But obviously, if the employees already bought IPO shares, they know that it's eventually coming, or that is the plan. But like I said, in the United States, like 95% of these IPOs never make it, and people who are working in the company had to put their hard-earned money to buy the IPO shares and lose the money if it never gets to IPO status.
I think it is somewhat frustrating for the investors and for many of the employees who are locked up in these shares that many of them cannot offload or get liquidity to put money down on houses or to get out of this heavy amount of compensation that they've had. But Uber and Airbnb have shown this stubbornness to stay private, and as you said, this ability to keep raising and raising money.
So there's always a risk. Now, these investors that are being affected by this so-called scandal were given an opportunity to get 30 times their money. So they got it for $1 a share, and they were given an opportunity to sell it for $30 a share. So that's not even doubling your money, tripling your money. That's 30x your money. So if you invested $100,000, 100,000 shares, let's say, and then you were offered $30 a share, you'd be cashing out at $3 million guaranteed before having to wait for an uncertain situation for the IPO and also an uncertain price for your shares. Now, that is the situation that Si-hyuk was able to provide for people who had these early IPO shares who did not want to wait or, important word, risk. Take the risk, which basically means if you did take the risk, like P-Dog, you get a higher return. Not risk waiting because the IPO maybe might never happen, or it may get rejected, or right now we think like, oh, it's impossible for Big Hit or HYBE to fold as a company. But that's also a possibility where like the company goes bankrupt and then you get nothing, but you still actually paid for the IPO shares and you're literally out $100,000 if you bought 100,000 shares like that. So immediately you get 3 million. So these people did not starve. These people did not get their money stolen. The accusation is that Si-hyuk sort of knew that the IPO was about to get approved, but he concocted this plan to grab their shares, grab the 100,000 shares from one place, 50,000 from another place, and worked with the private equity fund to make that happen. Because who paid the people who had like the 100,000 shares? It was the private equity firm. Did the private equity firm take the risk? No, actually. It turns out when we look at the actual evidence that the private equity firm, yes, may have paid these investors who didn't want to wait for the IPO. They paid them out, but if there was not going to be an IPO, Si-hyuk was going to pay back with his own money the private equity firm. So in a sense, for these people who did not want to wait around for the IPO, Si-hyuk, with his own personal financial health, guaranteed that these people would get 30x their money right away, guaranteed, no questions asked. Now, did he do a backroom deal where he got 30% of the profits? You know what? Even if he did, and I think he did, and I think it makes sense, he's the one that held all the risk. If everything fell apart, where he didn't have his IPO, he would be having to pay out all of these investors 30x the money of the initial IPO price. So usually in the business world, if you hold on to an amount of risk for an extended period of time, you expect to be compensated for that. So, under this whole situation, this whole scenario, because if he didn't get a return, then he's literally handing this private equity firm easy money with no work whatsoever. He should be able to get something back for that. And so if it's a 30% profit share, so the private equity firm would get 70% of the profits, and then he would get 30% of the profits, I think that's more than generous on his part, especially the amount of risk he was taking. And also, he didn't have to give these employees and early investors an option with this private equity firm at all. He didn't have to even do that to begin with. And he didn't even have to set it up with the private equity firm to begin with. But if you have a lot of people breathing down your neck saying like, look, I had to buy these 100,000 shares. I know it was only $1 each, but it's still a lot of money, $100,000. And like, I don't know, like if I lose that $100,000, I don't know what to do. Boom, I'll give you $3 million for it. Okay. Who wouldn't take that if it meant that, you know, you're one of these people who are not going to be comfortable and can't sleep at night because of this risk, and suddenly somebody offers you $3 million for your 100,000 investment? I think you got a very fair deal, because it's completely unfair for anybody to say that, oh, well, had I held on, I could have gotten so much more money for that. Yeah, you could have held on and you could have gotten so much more money for it, but you chose to sell. So just because you have this remorse over like how much more the jackpot could have been doesn't give you the right to send the police over and accuse Si-hyuk of defrauding you like this. Also, authorities are saying that there was too much time that passed between the supposed fraud of setting up this private equity firm and then the return on it. So where he got his 30% commission for, you know, this whole private equity thing. It's way too long of a time gap, and apparently that is a big litmus test for whether it's financial fraud. Usually financial fraud happens like the fraud happens and then the payout happens very close, and then, you know, because your priority at that point is the getaway car or like, you know, trying to flee the situation. So this is why it seems as if this is completely like one of these plays by the JIT, because when you look at this situation, the timeline is the T, okay? The T is in the timeline. July 15th, NewJeans Mama is cleared by the police. Remember, we went over in a previous video, the police said, oh, we can't find enough evidence that she is guilty. Although everybody else seems to have it, okay? Everybody is just like, here, my trapper keeper is full. But they're just like, well, we don't have enough evidence to show that she's guilty. Okay. The day later, July 16th, the Financial Supervisory Commission makes a formal complaint to the prosecution saying that we have enough evidence and it looks like Si-hyuk committed financial fraud under the Capital Markets Act, which also analysts are saying that it does not apply because what the FSC is charging Si-hyuk for is if he was defrauding investors in the stock market, on the open stock market. But what was happening at this time, the stock didn't even exist yet. Remember, it was before the IPO. So the law that they're trying to nab Si-hyuk on is only applicable after an IPO, when regular investors, you know, like you buying a share of HYBE and putting it into your, you know, stock portfolio, and you would be negatively affected by some sort of fraud. So it completely doesn't apply here. Authorities are saying the best that would apply in Si-hyuk's case, if he were guilty, is a criminal fraud between, you know, parties, like, you know, as if, you know, if your friend defrauded you or something like that, then you'd be going to the police station. But good luck if you have to go to Yongsan, because everybody's going to be wearing like a New York Yankees cap there. And definitely don't take any cookies if they're been offered to you. So July 17th and 18th was Jin's concert in Anaheim, an amazing event. So don't you see, like, a lot of you guys also have been saying that NewJeans Mama is always throwing up these kind of hands when BTS has great things happening and other groups within HYBE has great things happening. She's trying to sabotage everybody's shine. July 18th. Jin was embarrassed in court by B-Lift Lab, which we'll get to. July 18th, also another good day. BTS released its first ever live album, Permission to Dance, on stage live. Now, then the weekend passed, and come Monday, the police requested these search warrants. July 22nd, NewJeans' third anniversary, crickets. I think that was pretty convenient for all of this drama to be happening, so we forget that this is so embarrassing that their third anniversary, where are they? Nothing. Then, 2 days later, July 24th, HYBE was raided by the police. But also on this day, July 24th, there was the third hearing on the ADOR versus NewJeans hearing in court, where NewJeans was completely embarrassed and humiliated yet again. But people were just talking about this HYBE being investigated by the police. And then wouldn't you know, also on July 24th, the former Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, his house was raided in relation to, yes, remember the whole martial law debacle that was not even like 6 or 7 months ago in Korea? His house was raided to investigate his role in the whole martial law debacle by the impeached president, Yoon Suk-yeol. So NewJeans Mama might have think that she sort of just skated through and she's able to throw up all of these red herrings to ignore from the stank that is coming from her side of the courtroom. So let's remind people what happened with the whole B-Lift Lab hearing against Jin. Now, so smart and shady, B-Lift Lab, yes they did. Because remember, this whole thing was about plagiarism. B-Lift Lab is suing Jin because Jin was accusing B-Lift Lab Islet of copying. So what did they do in their legal arguments? They said, look, we're not saying that Jin also is a copier, but she's saying that Islet copied because of outdoor LED billboard usage at COEX. Okay, like your eye cream also does LED billboard usage at COEX. Selfies in front of the Eiffel Tower in Paris. All y'all who ever been to Paris on vacation, you are also plagiarizing NewJeans. Standing in line for a group photo shoot in a line. Yeah, usually if they were taking a wedding picture, stand in a line. Maybe there's several rows, but you gotta stand in a line. And then so they said, like, look, well, there are similarities actually between NewJeans and GFRIEND, 여자친구, from Source Music. And remember, this is the B-Lift versus Jin. But Source Music is also having its own legal fight with Jin. And Source Music is where NewJeans came from. And they're saying, like, look, and they presented slides because, you know, they had to do a PowerPoint. And they presented all these slides showing the similarities between NewJeans and GFRIEND. You know, just even this one music video, GFRIEND came out way earlier than NewJeans, and NewJeans is looking pretty GFRIEND-y, okay? 5 to 6 years before, okay? And then 20 to 25 years before was the original Jeans from Mexico. And then like 30, 40 years ago, Shack Attack, okay? So who is the real plagiarizer? B-Lift gave more receipts. They said that, look, there's ads shot in front of red structures with the sea and the sky in the background. Hanbok-themed photo shoots that happened 5 to 6 years before NewJeans. Group photos in white outfits with similar compositions, concept photos with dreamy aesthetics. This is just a standard motif, style, fashion that repeats itself through K-pop and probably other parts of the entertainment industry all around the world. So for NewJeans Mama to base this entire drama around retaliation for bringing up that Eyelet copied NewJeans is completely groundless. So let's go over the big day, July 24th, because yes, that was the day on Thursday, Korea time, where HYBE was raided by the police. They finally got their search warrant. We don't know what kind of bags of chips that they were able to find, but we'll keep an ear out for that. Secondly, the ADOR versus NewJeans hearing. How interesting. Now, the case with ADOR versus NewJeans, remember, it's for ADOR to say like, look, NewJeans, you have to honor our exclusive agreement with you, especially since we've invested tens of millions of dollars into you. We've already paid you out almost $5 million for each member, and you like are doing an about face and saying that you're just gonna cut and run. And so this case is going to go to mediation next month in August, and if they come to kumbaya, then it'll be over. And however that mediation results, finishes, will be as if the court, same legal power as a court ruling. If they can't come to terms, then in October, the court is going to make its final ruling. So we have a roadmap to the end of the ADOR NewJeans lawsuit. But it was kind of messy this week. Oh, it was real messy. And so ADOR side, remember, they wanted to bring out them Kakao Talk conversations, and they did. They brought out the conversations where Hee-jin talked about bringing NewJeans back after 3 years, or essentially stealing NewJeans in about 3 years. Like that would be the time frame. Remember, it was either with her VP or with her shaman. I think it was her shaman, where she was essentially planning out and plotting how she is going to be able to steal NewJeans under a time frame of 3 years and have it look more kosher, like a merger and acquisition type of chicanery. Now, NewJeans, this is only like 3 minutes or 4 minutes into the presentation, and then NewJeans legal team interrupted, and they're saying like, we asked you not to bring out those Kakao Talk messages. How could you? Because this was like the open court session where, all the reporters were, taking notes and, observing what was going on. And the judge wasn't having it. The judge was like, look, I even know about these Kakao Talk messages. How can these reporters not even know about the Kakao Talk message? Look, girl, we all know about what's been going on here. So can you just hush? So they got shut down. So they were able to present this whole situation where it was very clear that NewJeans was violating this agreement. ADOR said there's no reason for termination because we have provided so many opportunities and entertainment activities and given quick share of the profits to all of the NewJeans girls. So there's no reason for termination. NewJeans side, despite all of that, says that we can't trust ADOR. And of course, remember, the whole thing keeps changing. Why they can't trust them? First it was a hallway, then it was an elevator, then who knows, it was like a hair ribbon from Eyelet. They say that it's because it's not the ADOR, company structure-wise, which basically means that Hee-jin is not there running the company, and they want it back to the 2024 version of ADOR, which basically means bring Hee-jin back, and then maybe we'll come back to ADOR. They were also being ridiculed, the legal team, because NewJeans girls weren't there, but, we could have used Danielle's intermediate acting certificate class certification skills. But the lawyers had to give these emotion-based arguments. I wonder if they get a discount on the billable legal arguments because they're not legal fully, they're just emotional. So they're saying like, look, if you demand that these girls come back, isn't it just like having a victim of bullying go back to school with the bully? They said just being near the agency building makes their hearts race with anxiety to the point they need treatment for depression. How can anyone tell those young people to perform on stage just because they're under contract? Do the defendants not have any rights to personal dignity? I don't know about you all. I mean, yes, we do need labor protections and rights for workers, but if you've been hired to do a job, you must go do the job if you're under a contract. I can't believe lawyers whose whole bread and butter is contract based would even say something like this. Then the kicker was, it's also like a mother who raised us being kicked out while the abusive father tells us to come back, promising to bring a better mother. Now, I don't know what kind of family dramas is going on in their lives that they just pluck that from real easy. But what kind of arguments is this? Well, okay, fine. Let's go through let's entertain this argument for Pete's sake. The crux of this is that the members say that they cannot trust ADOR because the ADOR that they trusted no longer exists. Well, let's say that you caught your husband cheating and he just a big old lying, cheating, whatever. The one that you trusted no longer exists. But if you got married, you're still legally married, even though he ain't the 2024 version of your husband before you find out that he was cheating, lying. You can't just run off and declare yourself single without going through the legal procedures and cost and, whatever prenup or something that you had through an actual divorce. And yes, it'd be nice to ask your 2024 husband to come back before all that cheating stuff, but who knows, probably cheating back then. But really, you can't. And when you really think about it, who is actually the cheater in this situation? It was not the husband. It's the one making the accusations, because we know this whole town is chock full of bunny uncles with receipts for cookies on layaway and not biscotti. So it looks like the court is just like, yo, we already wrote our October ruling. Let's just get through this quick. No more shenanigans. So that's why it looks like the shenanigans have been taken out of the courtroom and into the public, the court of public opinion, where NewJeans Mama and the JIT cronies have a lot more leeway and success to be able to sabotage the situation. So this looks like a fishing expedition by the police going into HYBE because they know they can't actually get to the finish line with this whole... That's a fraud. The fraudulent investigation of charging Si-hyuk with fraud. But along the way, now that they got into the building and they're rifling through stuff, they're going to try to find something else to then create another ruckus, to then distract from their whole losing position in this whole debacle. Like I said, there ain't no rest for the wicked. And NewJeans Mama, she'd been bringing out her tricks and her treats early, which is why we need to stay vigilant. All right, guys, what do you think? Put your comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.